Hello and welcome to the American Experiment Podcast. Today is an exciting day at American Experiment because it is Golden Turkey Day. We have just launched the nominations for the 5th Golden Turkey Award. The Golden Turkey, you can go vote, by the way. The voting is begun. It is open. It'll be open for the next 3 weeks. GoldenTurkeyMN.com. We're going to say that, 10, 15 times during the podcast. We'll just keep saying it to make sure everybody knows how to vote. And if our crew in post-production is good, and I think they are, I hope they are, they'll put it on the screen so you can see it. GoldenTurkeyMN.com. Golden Turkey is kind of a lighthearted but serious effort to expose silly spending in state government, county government, local government, federal government. Anything is eligible for nominations. We just got through a period of a few weeks of nominations where we took nominations. I want to just put a special word out to all the people that nominated Tim Walz. Every time we do Golden Turkey, he does lead in the nominations. And I get it. They see Golden Turkey, they see state government, they nominate Tim Walz. That's really not the way the award is really structured. It's usually a project we like to award a Golden Turkey to, not a person. But if there ever was a person who was going to get the Golden Turkey Award, it would be Tim Walz, because we had lots of nominations, maybe 100, that said Tim Walz for spending the surplus and raising taxes, or Tim Walz for doing this or doing that. So I'm sorry we can't nominate Tim Walz, but maybe we'll have a special award for him later. We did get lots of nominations, and we're going to go through the 4 that we've chosen to put forward to the voters, and then this will culminate in a vote, which we'll announce. Actually, Joe Soucheray, a fellow podcaster, the Joe Soucheray podcast is going to announce the winner on the podcast live. I believe the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. That's usually when we do it. So that's coming up. Past Golden Turkey Award winners, just to kind of get you in the mix and the flow of what we're talking about here. The first one was a Tim Walz project, The Morgue. Remember back in COVID, he tried to scare everybody in Minnesota that everyone was going to die. So he went out and bought a morgue with state taxpayer money. Fortunately, thank goodness, we didn't need the morgue, and he ended up selling it. But we did take a little financial hit in that real estate transaction. So the Walz Morgue was the first nominee and winner. The next year we found a Golden Turkey rest stop on 35 on your way to Duluth from the Twin Cities. Brazilian teak wood, interior wood, just a Taj Mahal rest stop, nicest rest stop in America. I think they spent $7 million on it. That's what you all voted for the Golden Turkey that year. The following year, another transit-oriented project, the bus stop over the bridge there, Newport. The bus stop in Newport, a big bus station stop. Nobody ever goes there. Nobody ever uses it. MnDOT built it, and no buses go there. So that won the Golden Turkey that year. Then last year, thanks to the work of my colleague, who I'm going to introduce here in a second, Bill Glahn, Feeding Our Future was awarded the Golden Turkey for the massive fraud that Bill spent a lot of time uncovering and still does, because that we're still feeling the ramifications of the Feeding Our Future fraud with COVID money meant to feed kids lunches in the summer that was just ripped off. And so that was the last year's Golden Turkey Award. And then I should note, we offered a Lifetime Achievement Award in the Golden Turkey to the Southwest Light Rail Project. And again, this year we opened nominations. Many of you nominated Southwest Light Rail Transit Project for another Golden Turkey. They're already in the Hall of Fame. They've got the Lifetime Achievement Award, so that's good to go. They're in their massive boondoggle of all boondoggles. So, Bill, let's get right to the nominees for this year's Golden Turkey Award. We'll just go through them. I'll name them first, and then we can go through them one at a time maybe. The first nominee is a new state office building that the House members are going to live in once they get it done. They're spending about $500 million on a new state office building. We're going to talk about the fact that it's a boondoggle, and we're going to talk about the process they used to get it done, which is in itself deserves a Golden Turkey. Next one is the Northern Lights Express. This is a new train. You've heard of light rail. You've heard of commuter rail. This is heavy rail. This is on the real railroad tracks. Amtrak will run it. The legislature approved $200 million, like $195, we rounded up, $195 million for a train to go from Minneapolis to Duluth to carry people up there. It's going to get there in 2.5 hours, which is about what it would take to drive, and it's going to cost you $70 one round trip, which is kind of spendy. So we're going to talk about that as well. And then the third one, the Governor's Mansion Money Pit. Many of you nominated this mansion for the award. Governor Walz lives in a mansion. All governors do. The residence, they call it, on Summit Avenue. It needs repair. They went to the legislature and said, we're going to repair it. It's going to be about $7 million. And then this summer, they got in there and it's going to be $12 million. And it's growing in cost. And we need to discuss whether we should have a mansion on Summit Avenue where the governor and his family live. And that's the third one. And then finally, finishing up with a smaller dollar amount, but nonetheless, the aggravation level of this expenditure is high. And this is indicative, by the way, of many, many, many projects out there that we find in the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, the Legacy Fund. They get the money through sales tax, through a constitutional amendment. They have to spend it. So the projects come in and they send the money out. So we're going to talk about flying squirrel research in Minnesota. Your taxpayer dollars went, 186,000 of them went to flying squirrel research up in the University of Minnesota Duluth. So that's the fourth and final one we'll discuss. So let's get into it a little more detail. First nominee, the new state office building, the SOB as they call it. And Bill, you and I both had offices there over the years working for the House and even working for the Senate. The Senate used to be housed there. The minority Senate members were there. The majority party was in the Capitol. Minority senators were in the SOB. So it's an old building, granted, built in 1932, needs renovation, needs repair. But the plan for this building is not just to renovate it, repair it, bring it up to speed, bring it up to code. This is almost a $500 million project they're going to do. To put that in perspective, the state capitol, which is kitty corner across the street, we repaired that for like $300 million a few years ago. And if you've been in the new state capitol, it's gorgeous. They did a great job restoring it to the original way it was built. And we spared no expense to do that. But that was $300 million. They're talking about redoing the SOB that houses the House and the Secretary of State and a few other House offices, House of Representatives related offices like research and revisers and a legislative reference library, things like that, for $500 million. And the reason is they're adding a whole nother wing. So we're going to get redo the building that's there and then build a whole nother wing, expand the footprint by hundreds of thousands of square feet. And this is if you talk to House members, if you talk to staff, for the justification for this, it's like, oh, it's safety. We need it's not safe. It's not a safe building. And we need better security. So they're going to build a new wing for the public to go to for hearings. We can all go in there, but then where their offices are, that's going to be walled off behind massive security, metal detectors, probably, plexiglass or, bulletproof glass, who knows? So they'll be safe, but then the rest of us have to suffer in that neighborhood. And one of the points we make is if there's a safety problem to the point where you have to build a fortress to house the members of the State House of Representatives, maybe somebody in St. Paul ought to deal with the safety problems and crime and lawlessness down there across the state and especially in St. Paul. But that's kind of the setup, Bill. I mean, you've had an office there. You might know more about this building. That you've been there more recently than I am, but we're going to build a Taj Mahal. Kurt Dowd, state representative, former speaker, called it a Taj Mahal that they're going to build themselves at the Capitol.
Yeah, well, where to start? So for $500 million, you could buy a whole nother free food scandal. So This is just a massive amount of money. And you mentioned the state capitol, which they refurbished. Cass Gilbert, architect, that with national renown. It was worth preserving. And the public, one of the things they spent a lot of the money on at the state capitol was creating new rooms for the public, more access for the public so they could go to the hearings, so they could have meetings there. But the bulk of this building, the state office building, walled off to the public, you mentioned. You as the general public will never set foot inside the fortress part of it. They're going to build this other wing. And I've been there more recently than you. I had an office in the building for 7 years. We weren't using all of the building. When the state Senate built their own building across the street, a bunch of the functions moved out, and we weren't even using the entire building. You mentioned the 1932, it's a Depression-era building, one of those federal work progress buildings. There's nothing particularly historic about it. After spending 7 years in there, there's nothing really worth preserving. We could have that bulldozed and put a new building in its place for a fraction of the cost, and the aesthetics of the Capitol grounds would improve. So there's nothing really historic about it or worth preserving. The cost is ridiculous because it's such an old building. It literally costs more to renovate. It's like you have a 20-year-old car. It's not really worth putting a new transmission and a new motor in it. You're better off just buying a new car. So there's no reason to build this other than somebody got this idea that it should be preserved and kept. But it's not anything the public's going to benefit from. And $500 million, the public, like a lot of these things, not going to see a net benefit from it. So it's hard to justify it as a spending item.
No, and you kind of bring up a good point that this all started with this discussion of Tom Bach as they were talking about renovating the state capitol, where he decided that we need a new Senate building to house the Senate. And we've got to put all the Senate together in one building. So we built the Senate office building in 2014 or 15. By the way, it was a huge political issue. We're going to talk about the funding in a second. But Tom Bach lost his majority leader job. Arguably, was one of the reasons he lost it, because he built this new building. But the space issue at the Capitol is very interesting. The Senate majority members used to be in the Capitol. Actually, all of state government historically used to be in the Capitol. The DNR was in there. Everybody was in there. That's when state government was small enough to be in one building. What a great day that must have been. But the Senate used to be in the Capitol. They renovated the Senate, and they just, because we had to do some elevator things and some HVAC things in the Capitol. Suddenly there's no room for the state Senate there anymore. We need to build a new building. So once they built that new building, there's a glut of space now in the complex. So this idea that the House needs more hearing rooms is absurd. The Senate building has new hearing rooms. The Capitol still has lots of hearing rooms and lots of space. There's all kinds of empty space in the state Capitol that is a tragedy in itself. We got a whole wing full of things that are just empty, that used to house senators and Senate offices. And we don't have time to go into that, but there's now a gluttony of space, glut of space at the Capitol complex, and we're going to add to it with this House building and more committee rooms. If you walk around and audit it, it's really going to be silly.
Yeah, I just before you get onto the process part of it, I just want to reiterate the point you just made. For the first 75 years of the state's history, all of state government was in the Capitol building, and then the mission creep over the decades. In the 1930s, we had to build the state office building. It was literally that. The state's offices, all of the executive cabinet level agencies were fit into one 7-story building. And now we have House of Representatives, members and staff. That's all we have room for, because all of state government, every cabinet agency pretty much has its own dedicated office building somewhere in St. Paul or somewhere in the metro area, and it's spread all over the state. It's gotten to the point where we've gotten 75 years, we made do with one building, and then for a few decades after that, we made do with 2 buildings. Now everybody has to have their own building. It's like the sports stadia around the metro.
Well, you're absolutely right. And then, even legislators somehow need to have their own offices. I mean, if you go down to the Iowa State Capitol and many state capitals, the Iowa legislator sits on the floor of the House and has their assistant next to them, with a computer, and that's their office. That's where they do their work. They also vote from there. That's where they conduct their business. And if you need a room, you can use one of the conference rooms that line the building. You can just check one out or jump in and meet constituents and things. But with this idea that every legislator needs their own opulent office, and in the Senate, some of them have 2, one in the Capitol and one in the Senate office building. But that's one other point on this. We have this pandemic that hit, and you may remember, and then people stayed home and worked from home during the pandemic. Now, most businesses have come back to work because they've kind of worked through this whole idea that you could be more productive if you're not in the office. Maybe not. Those studies are kind of coming out now. So most businesses have come back to work. The last people to come back to work, of course, are state government employees. And if you walk through the state office building that they want to renovate and add space to today, you're going to find very, very few people there, because the staff of the House is on some kind of 2-day a week. They have to be in the office. 3 days a week, they don't have to be in the office. So in the era of COVID, they should probably make a decision. Is this going to be permanent? But it shouldn't be. But it's going to be a permanent workflow that state employees, state legislative employees don't have to come to the office. If that's true, then you do not need a brand new, huge new building at $500 million. I lost my train of thought. The other thought is that the session only is January to May in the odd year, and we're going to start in February in 2024 and go to May, maybe end in April, they end in early. That's the only time the legislature's there. So we're going to build this huge new building, $500 million for people that don't even work there all week and are only there less than 6 months out of the year. Welcome to state government. So, well, let's get to process, because we mentioned the Senate office building. They've done it again. Maybe the House was jealous. Hey, look at the Senate. They got their new building. And maybe they saw that the Senate majority lost votes when the polls lost their majority. And one of the reasons was the Senate office building that they built for themselves. So we have a new plan to build a $500 million building that's never been voted on by the full House or the full Senate. They did this convoluted two-step process that I'll try to explain quickly without boring everybody on the podcast. But so in 2021, in a special session in the summer, the state government finance bill is coming to the floor, and House wants a new building, and you got Senate Republicans with Paul Gazelka, and you got House Democrats with Hortman and Winkler, but they want to build their new building. But they don't want to vote on their new building. They don't want all of their members to say, yes, we should spend $500 million on a new office for me at my job. So we passed this bill with this provision in it, and I had to go back and find out where this language started and where it came from. So the state government finance bill is moving through the process in a special session. It's part of the budget. It funds the legislature. It funds state agencies. It funds government. In Ways and Means in the House, the author of the state government finance bill, Representative Nelson from Brooklyn Park, does an amendment that allows the Department of Administration through MMB, in other words, the Walls administration, to set up an account for renovating buildings on the Capitol complex. So it's not just the state office building. It's very general, except it only applies to buildings built before 1940. Oh, whoops, we're kind of narrowing it down now. There's only one building in the Capitol complex built before 1940. That's the state office building. So we've kind of narrowed it down now, but we're not specifically naming it. But you can set up an account that could be drawn on through certificates of participation. Oh, what's this kind of funding? Why not just go to use the bonding bill? Well, because in the bonding bill, you need a 2/3 or supermajority of the legislature to approve it. So we're not going to go that route, because then our guys would have to vote for it. So we can do this certificate of participation, which is a funding scheme where you kind of pay as you go. And it's the same exact way they did the Senate office building. By the way, now we're up to 2 buildings in the state history that have been funded this way, the Senate office building and this new one. So anyway, the process is set up in a 2021 amendment in Ways and Means. Republicans didn't understand what it was and just said, well, we don't get this. We're going to vote against it. So they voted against it in Ways and Means. It comes to the floor. The author never mentions this on the floor in his explanation. House Republicans spent all their time, because this is the end of the pandemic, they're very excited to get rid of emergency powers. So they spent all of their energy, all of their time, all of their amendments on emergency powers and the pandemic. Nobody does an amendment to say, hey, that language allows us to build a new state office building. Senate, same thing. It's in the bill. Nobody says the words on the floor. Nobody does an amendment. It passes. Now that's done. Step 1. Fast forward a year later, 2022. So the law says that if the main tenant of a building wants to renovate their building, can't tear it down, but they can renovate it, they could vote to do that. And so now we're in the House Rules Committee. Representative Winkler, Majority Leader, Chairman of the Rules Committee, brings it forward and says, we're going to do a new state office building using this language that was put in place last year, and we're just going to do it. And the language is there that we allow to. We're going to use the certificate of participation, bonding or borrowing process. By the way, much higher interest rates, so it's going to cost more to do it this way because they didn't take the vote to put the government, full faith and credit, as they say, behind the building. So a 2-step process. Now, House Republicans objected, but they'd already voted for this a year earlier without doing an amendment. I mean, I think the fix was in. Like, we're going to do this, and we're going to get a new building. And so 2-step process, 21, 22, no vote in the House, no vote in the Senate, $500 million building getting built. The process is almost as bad as the building itself, in my opinion. Okay, end of rant.
Well, it's just like, Well, it's just like the process they use to raise their own pay. So instead of being accountable for this, instead of taking a vote, something that voters might notice at the next election, they created this panel, this advisory committee, who has the power to raise legislator pay. So they're getting exactly what they want, higher pay. They knew the outcome. They knew that this body that they created was going to, year in and year out, vote for higher pay for legislators. So they're going to get exactly the result they wanted, but none of the accountability. Oh, I didn't raise my pay. It was this neutral third party expert group that raised my pay. So they don't have, John Kennedy, before he was president, wrote a book, Profiles in Courage, about congressmen in years past. And we have something close to the inverse of that. So it's just more par for the course. And it's just emblematic of what state government and what federal government has done. You have your legislators who run every 2 years or every 4 years, every 6 years, depending on their term. And they delegate all their power to some other group that'll give them the result, but without the accountability.
Yeah. So you did get to vote for a new state office building. Your representatives didn't even get to vote for you, but you can vote for it today at goldenturkeymn.com. You can choose the new state office building. I keep saying Senate office building. The new state office building that's being constructed soon. They're going to break ground, I think, in this winter. You can vote for that for the Golden Turkey Award 2023. It's not much, but it's something. Let's give it the Golden Turkey if you so desire. But we have other nominees. Moving on. The next nominee in the Golden Turkey Award 2023, another empty train. The committee sat down. We said, we have a committee that does this. Can we not do a transit project this year? It seems like every year in Golden Turkey, there's some stupid transit train, bus rapid transit, bus stop, rest stop. We couldn't do it. We couldn't get through it. The legislature forced our hand. They spent $200 million on a train from Minneapolis to Duluth. We can't ignore it. It has to get nominated. So here it is. They call it the Northern Lights Express. Why do they call it the Northern Lights Express? Well, because there used to be a Northern Lights Express. As in a great piece that Tom Hauser and KSTP this week did on TV, he went back and there was a Northern Lights Express from 1975 to 1985, from Minneapolis to Duluth and back, run by Amtrak. It shut down in 85. You know why? Can you guess? No one was riding it. So a train that nobody was riding in 1985, well, that was a long time ago. Things have changed. People ride trains more. No, not really. We're gonna redo it, and so now $200 million. By the way, that's only 20% of the total cost of this project. This is one of those state kicks in 20%, federal kicks in 80%. Where have we seen this before? Southwest Light Rail Transit. I kind of put an asterisk next to the $500 million price. That's the starting price. Okay, that's the floor. You know how these things go. It's going to go up, not down. But we're going to build a bus or a train. And you can get on at Target Station, and you can go to Coon Rapids and Cambridge. It's going to go to the casino. They're really betting on ridership. They think 750,000 people are going to ride this train every year. Unbelievable projection for ridership, not based in anything, no experience, not based in fact. I don't know how they get these numbers. Part of it is the casino. Oh, Grandma and Grandpa are going to get on at Target Station. I don't know how they're going to get there. Uber, drive their car, park there, take a bus, and they're going to take the train up to Hinckley and get off at the casino. Carrying their oxygen tank into the casino. They have to get a shuttle, though, from the train stop to the casino because it's about 2 miles, which I'm sure the casino will be happy to provide. And then they're going to gamble, then come back, and then hoof it back to Minneapolis. By the way, $35 fare to get there and $35 to get home. So that's $70 for that senior citizen to take the train up to Hinckley to gamble. That's a lot of nickel slots. That's a lot of gambling dollars they're going to lose on the ride there. I'm not sure that's going to work. And then on to Duluth. You end up in downtown Duluth. Now what? Saw a news story on this when it came out. It said, residents of the Twin Cities will be able to take the train to the North Shore. I was like, no, they won't. They'll take a train to downtown Duluth. And then how do they get to the North Shore? It's another 2 hours up to Lutsen or Grand Marais. So you're going to have to rent a car. I mean, so it doesn't really do what they're selling. It's another train to nowhere. It's another boondoggle. The ridership numbers aren't going to match. It's just we had to give it a nomination for Golden Turkey, and judging by other projects like this, it might actually win. So that's my rant, Bill. What can you add to this great story of the train to Duluth?
Well, as it happens, this past summer, you and I, as part of our summer tour with the Center of the American Experiment, went to Hinckley
Yes,
and went to Duluth
that's
on the
right.
same day. So we left our offices in Golden Valley. We drove up to Hinckley. We did an event in Hinckley. We got back in the car, drove up to Duluth. So we followed the exact route, more or less, of this train. And we got to Duluth, and then what? The event we had was not anywhere near the train station in Duluth. It was a couple of miles on the edge of town. So we would have had to rent a car or get a taxi or an Uber to get us to and from. It's just not a very practical transportation solution. I don't quite understand. You mentioned the Lifetime Achievement Award for the Southwest Light Rail. You are right. We could have that project nominated every year for the Golden Turkey, and it would win every year because we're still spending money on it. It still isn't up and running. You know, I've seen some of the stations they're building in the West Metro suburbs. The train is still years away from operating, but they've already dropped at least $1 billion into the ground and have accomplished nothing. This was a train you mentioned. I'm glad you clarified that, because at the beginning you said it was a new train. It's not a new train. It's an old train that was discontinued for lack of ridership. So they brought it back. They're not going to get the ridership they want, but for whatever reason, there are a group of people, they call themselves progressives, that are so enamored of these 19th century transportation solutions, whether it's the streetcar or whether it's the railroad. If it was good enough for Abe Lincoln, it's good enough for us. It doesn't really address any of the real transportation problems we have in Minnesota, but there are people who are just gaga about the train, and we keep throwing hundreds of millions, billions of dollars down this rat hole. And you didn't even mention the commuter train, which goes up to, was it Big Lake and
Big
down
Lake,
to
yep.
And when we had COVID hit, the ridership entirely vanished.
Yeah.
And our existing light rail, which basically is moving homeless people to and fro about the metro, and we have not gotten anything close to value for money.
Well, this one's gonna have 1 million people riding it by 2040, according to projections. By the way, it's going to create 3,000 construction jobs. I mean, they always say that. They have no idea how to make those productions. 500 permanent jobs once it's done. Oh, they also brag about creating $15 million in local state sales tax for the area. I'm thinking, so this is just perverse, I think. It's like, hey, spend $200 million in state income taxes, and it'll benefit the local communities and the state because it'll create $15 million in sales taxes we get back. You know, so what does that even mean? I mean, you're spending tax money to get tax money. It's absurd. And by the way, the other argument they make, oh, this is just 20% of the cost. The federal government's going to pay for the rest of the thing. Well, what's the federal government? That's us as well. It's more tax money, of course. So our own John Phelan, our economist, who is a member of the Golden Turkey Nominating Committee Award, he was on this TV piece this week, and he had a great quote. I want to read it. He says, it only makes sense to subsidize things people will actually use. This train will end up being a very expensive way to ferry oxygen from one part of the state to another. There's no better quote than that from our own John Phelan on the train to nowhere. Another empty train, another Golden Turkey Award. GoldenTurkeyMN.com if you want to vote for the Northern Lights Express as your nominee. It's a great nomination. All right, moving on. 3 out of 4 here. The Governor's Mansion. Again, like I said earlier, many people nominated this. Many people nominated Governor Walz and the building of his mansion or the renovation of his mansion. And this is a tricky topic, maybe, if I'm being fair. You know, we were gifted in 1965 this mansion on Summit Avenue. And by the way, if you work in state government or if you work for a governor, like Bill and I have both worked for governors, they never let you say mansion. You always got to say residence. It's the governor's residence. It's not the governor's mansion. We don't want to call it a mansion. But of course, everybody in the public calls it the governor's mansion because it's a mansion. And it's on Summit Avenue. The Dodge family, beautiful. If you've been to the Dodge Nature Center, same family. They donated it to state government so that it could house the governor's family. And then over the years, it has gone into disrepair, of course, because it's a house on Summit Avenue. But governors through the decades have used private fundraising to raise money to fix up the mansion. Many first ladies have taken that on as a project. Many governors have held fundraisers to raise money to fix it. When Jesse Ventura was in office, it was in such bad shape, he didn't want to go to the taxpayers and say, yeah, let's spend money on the mansion. So he just shut it down, and they just moved back to Maple Grove and their ranch, and they lived there. And he drove into work like everybody else did. The staff was let go. But you know, you get Democrats in office. Well, Tim Pawlenty used it sparingly. You know, he had high school kids when he was governor, so he kept his house in Eagan and lived there most of the time. Used the mansion for meetings, for social events, but really didn't live in it. But now you got Dayton and Walls. The first thing Mark Dayton did when he won the governor's race, sold his place in Minneapolis, moved in full time. First thing Tim Walz did when he won his governor's race, called his real estate agent in Mankato, sold his house. No more mortgage. This is awesome. I can live in St. Paul on the taxpayers. And so now that he's won re-election, we need to upgrade it. So they came forward and said, look, it's going to cost $7 million to renovate, fix up the governor's mansion. Of course, you know, just like in government, everything costs way more than it needs to. And always in the name of security again. We're getting all the secure. Oh, we got to make it secure. It's got to be safe, secure. If you've ever been there, there's a gate. It is secure. You know, but we got to protect the governor and his family. So in the name of security, $7 million project. Then it ballooned over the summer. They get in there. I picture it's like one of those shows on HGTV where the guy says, "Well, that was a load-bearing wall, so when we tear it down, we're going to have to put a beam in, and the HVAC was a lot worse than we thought." And so this moment in the show where the budget is blown, and what are we going to do? And then they figure it out, and then they build this beautiful house. The problem is that just happened. Went from $7 million to $12 million. It's our money though. It's not HGTV money. It's not some client's money. It's taxpayer money. And they actually, the Walz administration actually understood and said, wow, that's a big increase. We better pause. So they paused and they wrote a letter to the legislative leaders and said, hey, this is costing a lot more. We just want to bounce it off you before we go forward. Well, yeah, Speaker Hortman's all in. You know, the Majority Leader in the Senate's all in. I mean, these are people that think they're going to live in the mansion someday. They all think they're going to be governor. So, yeah, fix it. You know, don't worry about it. Let's do it. So the mansion, $7 million, now $12 million. I think the bigger question, though, Bill, is there another solution? Should we sell the thing? Should we figure out another place for the governor and his family to live, keep them safe? There is a security issue. Keep them safe. Cheaper? You know, what's the big solution here?
Yeah, sell it. That is the obvious solution. It's an old house. It's a historic house. Let some wealthy person buy it and move into it and live with it with their family. More power to you. So they had this thing donated to them back in the 60s and were too polite to say no, very Minnesotan. So they've kept this thing, and decades later, it's fallen into disrepair. You mentioned the past governor that you and I worked for. Hardly ever used the building, but every now and again there'd be meetings. You and I have both been in the building. It's a very nice building. I'd call it a mansion. Very nice building, but it's nowhere near the Capitol. If you know the geography of St. Paul, Summit Avenue starts near downtown St. Paul, but the mansion itself is many blocks further west. And so for staff to commute to a meeting there or for meetings to be held there is kind of inconvenient for everyone involved, other than when Dayton was there and he lived there, and it was easy. It was convenient for him. So if the issue is security, you know, rent a penthouse in one of those condo buildings in downtown St. Paul where you have secure garage entrances at a fraction of the cost. The state troopers can easily secure the governor and his family or her family at a fraction of what the price would be to renovate this many decades old mansion in this historic neighborhood. There is no practical reason for it. It was a nice gift and very generous, but it's not a practical solution to housing and caring for the governor and providing security. As nice as a building as it is, it's nowhere near the Capitol, and there's no reason for its existence.
I think a nice gesture, if they sold it, they could sell it, and Olivia Dodge, who's passed away, obviously, would love it, I think, if the money that we gained in the sale was donated to the Dodge Nature Center over in West St. Paul, which also bears her name. What a great fitting end to hey, thank you for the gift. We've kept it this long. We've used it. Appreciate it. We've sold it. The revenue goes back to the Dodge Nature Center in that family name, and then we move on with a better solution. One other thought on this, too, is this thing's kind of been a problem from the beginning, because when they announced they're going to do the renovations, the governor said, I need a place to live, because he doesn't own a home. So they went out, they're going to go find a place for the governor to live during the construction. And they ended up with another mansion on the lake in Sunfish Lake with a monthly rent of $17,000. Again, paid for by the taxpayers. So it's like, I mean, legislators were doing their own searches, trying to rent a house somewhere in Minnesota for anywhere near $17,000. I think the closest anybody got was still less than $10,000 a month in your former hometown, Bill, of Edina. They could build a beautiful home in Edina for like $9,000 a month, was the most expensive rental they could find. And somehow we got to spend $17,000 a month, taxpayer money, so the governor can be at Sunfish Lake on the lake. Now, he got lucky. He knew that was a huge problem for him politically. And then we have a changeover at the U of M, and all of a sudden the president's house at the U of M. By the way, if you look that up, another huge political problem for the U of M, renovating that thing over the years. President Keller back in the day spent money on that, and everybody criticized him. Anyway, that building is open, so the governor was able to move into that. And that's where he is right now. Smart move, way less rent. State already owns it. So this thing's kind of was doomed from the beginning. And that's why I think a lot of people are going to vote for it at goldenturkeymn.com. Vote for the governor's mansion money pit. And send a message. You could send a message by your vote. If this wins, I think that's a clear message that a third solution is in order. Sell the mansion, come up with something different, save us some money. All right, final Golden Turkey nominee for 2023. This project is, I'll just briefly talk about it, $186,000 grant to the University of Minnesota Duluth to study flying squirrels because there's a research gap. There's a key knowledge gap. Here it is. To determine current distribution and habitat associations of northern and southern flying squirrels to fill key knowledge gaps in flying squirrel status in Minnesota. You thought we had an achievement gap. You thought that was a problem. This is not our problem. The key knowledge gaps in southern and northern flying squirrels is really the Minnesota problem that needs attention. That's why it gets a $186,000 grant from the legislature to the U of M Duluth to study this. This is kind of the essence, I think, of the Golden Turkey. The Golden Turkey was loosely following the Senator William Proxmire of Wisconsin's Golden Fleece Award back in the day. And these awards, big projects are good. They're easy to find, like this Train to Duluth, $200 million, the SOB, $500 million. But it's the dollar amount can be small and the aggravation level can be high. And so the Golden Turkey seeks to find even small projects dollar amount wise, $186,000, nothing in the scheme of a huge budget the state. But it still meets the spirit of the Golden Turkey Award even better, I think. So we're going to study flying squirrels research, and I looked into this a little bit and found the keywords. The reason, what we're really looking at is southern flying squirrels are migrating further and further north every year, 12 miles a year, based on the current research, due to climate change. So we found the magic words. If this was Groucho Marx, the thing would come down. You've said the magic word, climate change. Ding, 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 ding. Now we can fund this thing because we've got to figure out the migration patterns of the southern flying squirrel to help us, I guess, understand climate change. I'm not sure what the point is. Okay, if it's warmer, the squirrels are going further north every year. So what? What do we need? What do we need $186,000 to study that for? How many teachers can we fund with $186,000? How many people can we get into a treatment facility and off the street instead of being homeless? How many people can we help in a nursing home that they desperately need money with $186,000? Why are we studying flying squirrels? And this, by the way, this is one project indicative of many, many, many grants of this dollar amount through the Environment and Natural Resource Trust Fund, through the Legacy Fund, constitutionally dedicated funds, through the sales tax. That's a whole other topic, but they have to spend the money, so this is the kind of stuff they come up with. So I don't know, Bill, you've got a great background in energy and climate. Not sure you've ever really spent a lot of time pondering, the effects of the migration of the southern flying squirrel.
Well, I got a question for you before I launch into my rant on this. So I, in 28 years of living in Minnesota, I don't recall ever seeing a flying squirrel. So has the southern flying squirrel made it to Minnesota yet, or are they still on the way?
No, they're here. We have the northern flying squirrel and the southern flying squirrel. They're both here in Minnesota. It's just the southern flying squirrel is getting further and further north every year. No, just a little. I'm not an expert or anything, but I've been reading about this. They don't actually fly. But if they spread out, they've got like a webbed-based body, so they can glide. So it's more accurately, they're a gliding squirrel. They can do 20 or 30 feet from tree to tree. Get the wind and glide. So they're also nocturnal. I can say I have personal experience with flying squirrels. They infested my house about 10 years ago. It was a nightmare. They got in through some holes and had to get rid of them. But they're nocturnal, and they don't fly. They actually glide. That's everything I know about the flying squirrel.
All right. Well, still haven't seen one. Still have not seen a flying squirrel. You mentioned my former suburban home in Medina. On my property, we had gray squirrels, black squirrels, red squirrels. I don't recall ever seeing an albino squirrel, but never a flying squirrel. So I don't know where these squirrels are. You mentioned the migration farther north. I am much, much more concerned about the migration farther north in my childhood home, the Commonwealth of Virginia. I don't know if you know this, but alligators live in North Carolina and have been spotted within 12 miles of the Virginia-North Carolina border. So I'd be much more concerned and much more willing to spend tax money to keep alligators out of Virginia than I am southern squirrels out of northern Minnesota. But that being said, again, yeah, it's funny. This is a goofy waste of $186,000. But I guess I'm going to defend it slightly because you mentioned we have these trust funds. We have the lottery money, and then we have that legacy amendment where we have that special dedicated sales tax where we create these pots of money that, for whatever reason, people believe have to be spent year in and year out. And so we're spending $186,000, and it's tens of millions of dollars in these pots of money that are spent on, quote, environmental or stuff like that. And it's possible, maybe not likely, but it's possible this $186,000 could expand our total sum of knowledge in science and specifically about flying squirrels or squirrels in general. So we might end up having more human knowledge at the end than we started with. But what I've always hated about these trust funds and this environmental spending is when they take your tax dollars, whether it's through a sales tax that you pay on something you buy, or if you play the lottery, a little slice of your lottery money, and they go spend it on nonprofits who go to the Capitol and lobby against you. So we spend millions of dollars of this tax money on nonprofits who are all on the far left side of the political spectrum, and they show up at the Capitol every year lobbying for stuff you didn't even know was needed or wanted. Gimme, gimme, gimme. And so we're spending our own dollars lobbying against ourselves. So, This wouldn't be the one I voted for because it's $186 we're wasting that's not going to be used.
So your defense of the appropriation is it could have been worse.
Yeah, right. It could have been a lot worse, and maybe it will be. Maybe they'll take this and say we can't ever build anything in Minnesota anymore because we'll disturb the southern flying squirrel habitat. So it could boomerang back on me. Who knows? But again, I don't want to tip my hand here, but it's not the one I'm going to be voting for.
Okay. Well, there's one other note to this that's also kind of indicative of state government. This started with a pilot program. This is not our first year in funding flying squirrel research. This started with a $7,500 pilot. So the professor up in UMD got the grant and did a little pre-research, and that led to the grant now for $186,000. So he's going to be able to hire a couple of grant researchers to help him, graduate students, put them to work. And so the next generation of this is we're going to have, the Department of Small Mammals, at the University of Minnesota Duluth with 18 full-time equivalent employees and all the benefits, and we'll never be able to get rid of them. So this is how it works, man. $7,500, that's nothing, peanuts. And then $886,000 grant. We got to get, we got to solve the knowledge gap, in our research. And then we got to have an institute. We're going to have a Flying Squirrel Institute, University of Minnesota Duluth. I can see it, so. Anyway, Bill's not voting for that one. Fine, because he thinks it could be worse. Not a very strong endorsement. Minnesota, no, what I got that. GoldenTurkeyMN.com if you want to vote for flying squirrels. So at the end of the show now, we've got our 4 nominees out there. The voting has begun. I already voted. I'll reveal who I voted, Bill, if you'll reveal who you voted. And there's nothing preventing you from voting more than once, but really you should just, vote once. I voted for the state office building mainly because as I researched it and wrote the narrative for it, I got madder and madder about how it was done. Just the lack of transparency, the everybody just shut up, Republicans and Democrats, and the thing just gets done kind of on the side. And it's $500 million, which never had a vote in the Senate or House, wasn't in a bonding bill, wasn't, and you're going to argue it's not debt. Actually wrote that into the law. This is not debt because debt requires a majority vote of the Senate and the House. So that got my vote. State office building, $500 million for the process and the boondoggle. What got your vote, Bill?
Well, you make a very compelling case using logic and facts, but I voted purely out of spite. I spent 7 years working in the state office building. The place is a dump. We should tear it down.
All right. Sell the mansion, tear it down, take the train to Duluth to study squirrels. That's the plan. Minnesota. Well, I keep saying it wrong. GoldenTurkeyMN.com. Go and vote. The voting will be open for 3 weeks. And like I said, Joe Souchere on his podcast is going to announce the winner the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. It's been a great podcast, Bill. Thanks for joining us. And thanks, everybody, for listening. This has been the American Experiment Podcast.